Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of High Floor Fantasy. My name is Sam Wagman. I am one of your hosts, and with me, as always, is my trusty companion, Jay Arsh himself. What's going on, buddy? How you doing tonight?
What's up? I'm good, man. Happy Tuesday. It's one of those weeks that feels like it should be a Thursday, but it's a Tuesday. Either way, happy to be here. Happy to talk some Dynasty trade targets. And that's kind of the season we're in right now. I know we kind of went back and forth on it, but we are in that part of the offseason, where we're a little bit before redraft. Some people are doing best ball. But it's perfect time for the Dynasty trades to start cooking. So I'm excited to do this with you tonight.
Yeah, I mean, dynasty trades are always good to look at because, like you said, we are still kind of in dynasty season. Rookie drafts are popping. We still have startups going. So, this is a great time for us to go over some of our favorite trade targets at the quarterback and running back positions. And we will, of course, do our pass catchers in next week's episode. That'll be a blast as well. I'm sure we will have a ton to talk about. So I'm happy. I'm ready to get into it. You ready?
Let's go. Let's get started.
Let's do this thing. So look, the big thing for me was I wanted to start this off with a bang. And my first person I want to talk about that I want to trade for in every single dynasty league that I don't have him. He goes as an automatic. This is a guy that, if you have the opportunity to get him, you go get him. But I kind of view him almost as the QB1 overall, and that is Justin Herbert for me. Now, I love Justin Herbert. I've been a big fan. I even thought that he might be better than Tua coming out. Now, obviously, it was easy for us to write off Tua since he had the hip injury, and he was kind of unsure as he came into the league. The Dolphins believed they took him at number 5, leaving the Chargers to take Herbert at 6 overall. But Herbert showed out right away. I mean, he did incredible his rookie year. So he made it work. And then he had an incredible season in his second year. So look, now we're going into season 3 for him. He adds another great offensive line help in Zion Johnson in this year's draft. They looked at wide receiver, could be an eye to the future for them, as Keenan Allen starts to get up there in age. But I'm all in on Justin Herbert right now. What about you?
Yeah, I am. One point that I want to touch on first is, I've been harping for the Chargers for 2 years now. I mean, a little bit different situation, but you were just saying to add some different receivers. I've wanted them to get Will Fuller for 2 years now, and I've thought he would just add such a fun, different element to that offense. I mean, that they really don't have, but that might be more of a dream than a reality. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. Either way, I think, you touched on it, and it's an interesting conversation because Justin Herbert goes as a third quarterback in pretty much every, startup right behind Mahomes and Josh Allen. And, everybody values him highly. It's not necessarily a secret, but there is nuance to the conversation that I think is interesting because, the difference between maybe a Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and then that kind of next tier, which may be Justin Herbert, maybe, the Kyler Murrays, Joe Burrows, Lamar Jackson, those guys. There is a difference, when you're trying to trade in Dynasty for those guys who are still expensive versus maybe the Mahomes, Josh Allen tier. So if you're willing to pay the, Mahomes, Josh Allen price for Justin Herbert, there probably is a better chance that you could get him back at least, if you're valuing him that way. So I think that there is more nuance to the conversation than it sounds on the surface, where it's like, oh, trade for Justin Herbert, obviously. But are you willing to pay the price for Justin Herbert is the more interesting part. And it seems like you're willing to essentially overpay for Justin Herbert compared to consensus. So I think that does make him a target because you're able to get him, for a little bit cheaper than maybe the other guys that are in that same tier for you, but might be a tier above for, the person you're trying to trade with.
Yeah. And for me, the thing with Herbert, you obviously have to lump in, the main question to answer is what makes him more valuable than Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And I'll start with Allen, who is pretty much the consensus QB1 at this point. I think we would both agree on that. His amazing numbers last year, coupled with his rushing ability and the fact that the Bills really haven't had a running back one and almost use him as their RB1, especially around the goal line, has meant that Allen has become the easy choice for the first quarterback off the board in most leagues. But for me, I think that what you can get over him is that the Chargers are in a position where they play in a division where they might actually have to be throwing more than any other team. And this is why I almost have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert side by side in my rankings. And I'm not really sure what to do about Josh Allen because I don't know if he can keep this up as long as he wants to. His skill set is not as conducive to long lasting output as Herbert's and Mahomes are, because they're playing in divisions that have so much more competition. They're going to be in dogfights back and forth every single time they play division games. Between the Chiefs, the Chargers, the new look Broncos, and the new look Raiders, you got dogfights in every team in that division. So using that as a stepping stone into my main argument, look, Herbert throws the ball an absolute ton. He was number 2 in the NFL in pass attempts last season, number 2 in passing yards, number 3 in air yards. But the best part, he had 23 red zone carries, which ranked 3rd in the NFL in the NFL. So that's a great upside for him. He should have, with those kind of numbers in the red zone, he should have some positive touchdown regression this upcoming season. So I love that for him.
Yeah, and I mean I agree with you. I like the Herbert call. It was a little, unconventional at first, but the way that you explained it, I think it makes sense. And like I said, there's more nuance to it than it seems on the surface. It's him going as the QB3 already, and essentially if you're willing to pay the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen price for Justin Herbert, then you should have an easier time acquiring him. So it's always interesting. I mean, I just, we talked about it pre-show. We'll probably touch on it again as we're talking about these quarterbacks. I mean, I just made a big trade in one of the leagues we're in with Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes both included. And, it becomes an interesting discussion when you start to, debate a little bit how much more is Patrick Mahomes worth than a Joe Burrow or than a Justin Herbert or something. And, it's going to differ for everybody. Everybody's got their own preference when you get to those top tier guys. There's not as much that you can be like, to hang your hat on. It's like, I prefer this guy. I think this guy's better. He's got more long-term stability. So, and you touched on all those sort of things. And we might have forgot to say in the beginning too is, we kind of, as we were going through this exercise of looking for some trade targets, I kind of went on the deeper side with some of these guys, some of the quarterbacks, especially. That's kind of where I found the ones where I thought were interesting to get in trades. You went a little bit on the higher side, and so we're going to kind of balance it out both ways. You ready for me to go to my first guy, or you got any more?
Absolutely. Nah, absolutely. I think that point quite well.
All right. Well, let me put this crab leg in my mouth. Put this W in my mouth. For Jameis Winston.
You're going to eat a W? You're going to eat a W?
Wow, it looks like Craig called that right as I was saying it. One of our listeners said Jameis. I don't know how he got that first. But Jameis is my first quarterback, and we're basing this off of Fantasy Pros ECR, the expert consensus rankings. ADP is not super reliable this time of year for Dynasty and startups because there's a lot of different things going on. Rookies getting tossed into the draft, all sort of things messing with the ADP. So we're going with the ECR expert consensus rankings from Fantasy Pros, which we reached out to our boy, shout out Derek Brown, to confirm that it is accurate, that he's updating it weekly. So back to my first quarterback, Jameis Winston. So he's going as being ranked as the QB 26 right now, which, isn't super far down. I mean, there's 32 teams, 32 starters in the NFL. But, Jameis just signed a 2-year extension, $28 million, $21 million guaranteed. He's a free agent again in 2024, so 2 years from now. But he goes back to the Saints, and, he's 28 years old, going on 29, which it feels like we kind of skipped some time with Jameis, because he came into the league early on. It kind of feels like it's gone by fast. I feel like Jameis got to 29 a little fast. But that being said, he only played in 7 games last year before tearing his ACL. He scored a high of 29 the first game of the season, but throughout those 7 games, he averaged 16 points per game, which if he played that full season and, extrapolate, as we like to say in fantasy, and average 16 points per game, he would have been the QB 14 last year. So borderline QB 1, right outside that. And when you really start to think about it, I mean, is Jameis that expensive to acquire? I don't think so. I mean, Drew Brees was just getting picked up the other day because there was rumors he might come back in Dynasty. But that being said, I mean, similar to, what we're going to talk about with a couple of these quarterbacks, but Jameis got some, extra weapons added to his roster. I mean, you got Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry to go along with Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. It's a kind of loaded Saints offense, and Jameis is there for at least the time being, for at least 2 more years. And either he can, maintain there and he can stay in New Orleans with these new weapons. Again, we'll kind of see what happens with Michael Thomas, but good setup. So either he stays in New Orleans, or I think Jameis can do enough to, maybe find himself somewhere else after his contract is up, only, 28 years old. So some of the guys that are going around him are at least being ranked around Jameis right now. Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, Baker. I think it becomes kind of an interesting conversation with some of those guys. I mean, what you start to weigh is upside versus stability, right? And I think Jameis has the upside. We know that he has it. We saw it in Tampa Bay when he had a good receiving core in the past. The stability is in question, but I think the other guys around Jameis, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield, I mean, none of those guys are necessarily stable either. So I think Jameis is an interesting target. There's going to be a kind of a theme with my 3 quarterbacks where, they might not be the sexy high-end quarterbacks to get, but in Dynasty, a lot of the time that I find that hurts teams down the line, especially, in Superflex, really only in Superflex. But when you invest in your top 2 quarterbacks and then you don't really care about having a QB3 is a terrible mentality to have in Superflex, because if one of those quarterbacks gets hurt, it's going to be really hard to find that starter midway through the season. So you want to invest in these guys before you want to try and get a QB3, and Jameis fits that bill. So my long-winded Jameis explanation. What do you think?
I mean, I love it. And also, you have to think about bye weeks in these super flex weeks as well, which makes having a good third quarterback extremely necessary. And Jameis is probably one of the better ones out there. Like, we've seen this guy's upside. He's got 5,000 yard and 30 touchdown upside. We all know it. It may come with 20-plus interceptions, but that doesn't matter that much in fantasy football unless you play in leagues that penalize you for interceptions. And, unless we're talking, we're talking Scott Fishbowl sometimes over here where you get penalized for interceptions, but not a ton of leagues are known for doing that. So my thing with Jameis is I'm really happy that he landed with the Saints, back with the Saints, because this is a spot where he feels comfortable. Obviously the coaching change might do a little bit, make it a little funky. We're going to see how this Dennis Allen ran team works for Jameis, in the meantime, but he's overcome this kind of thing before. I want to see what he can do with a full complement of weapons off a full season of getting acclimated to this offense. And like you said, he gets Michael Thomas, hopefully. He'll get Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry is there. Alvin Kamara should have, at this point, I would guess that Alvin Kamara avoids a lengthy suspension. We're going to see what kind of number that lands at, but I would guess it's on the lower side at this point. He's going to have a complement of weapons, and he's going to have to throw the ball in this division. I mean, this they're going to be going up against a lot of teams that can score looking at their schedule, and I want to see how they do with Jameis in the long run. And I think he could be set up for a long time. He got to learn from Drew Brees, and he talked about that earlier. I was listening to SiriusXM on the Fantasy Channel earlier, and he was talking about how he learned from Drew Brees, how he learned to be patient. He learned that some of his mistakes that he made while with the Buccaneers were a result of him being extremely impatient to try and get the guy to his preferred guy and not kind of waiting for things to open up down the field a little more. So I'm really excited to see what Jameis can do, and I'm definitely going to have him ranked higher than he is right now. And I think he has definite QB1 upside this year. It's going to be really interesting to see where he lands there.
Yeah, and like every player in Dynasty that you evaluate, it's a ratio between risk and stability and upside. I mean, you're kind of balancing those things, the upside and the risk. And like I said, the other guys that Jameis is going around, Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield. I mean, I think Jameis has more upside and also might have more stability. So, I mean, not a lot of stability, but when you're comparing him to the Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones of the world, I don't know that they're much safer. So that's my point on Jameis. Who is your next guy?
My next guy is going to be Zach Wilson, who's going off the board at QB 18 right now. Now, obviously, Zach Wilson is the media darling of the season. We all got the reports about a week ago. They had come into rookie minicamp beefed up. Maybe he can take some more hits. He's got some more strength. Might not go down as easy. But look, we cannot deny the obvious here. He had a massive upgrade to his offense this offseason. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. They got Mekhi Becton to come back. Look, stability is great. So in his second year, we should see a sizable leap from him. And this is a guy who only threw 9 touchdowns his rookie season. That's not great. It's right alongside Trevor Lawrence bad, which is not something I ever thought I would say. But look, we saw some bursts from Wilson at the end of last season. He had that sick 52-yard rushing touchdown in week 16 last year. And look, I think Elijah Moore is a big breakout factor for this team. From weeks 8 to 13 last year, he averaged almost six catches for 77 yards per week. And the fact that this O-line is better as a whole will allow this entire wide receiver core to have more time to get their routes done and finish. And I don't see a scenario where this team doesn't take a step up offensively. And it could be, honestly, a giant step. They're going to have more consistency with Breece Hall. Mekhi Becton coming back healthy, which means their O-line will finally be healthy for the first time in forever. And it was one of the better rushing lines last year, which will open the lines up for Zach Wilson even more. And the best part, his deep ball should get better. His deep ball accuracy rate last year was 6.7, which ranked 5th in the NFL. So I like looking at Zach Wilson as a guy that should kind of take that step forward. Maybe we're not saying full on breakout just yet, but I think he can get up there and really set the stage for his year 3 to be his best one yet. Because look, he needs to step up. Otherwise, this team is doomed. This is a team that spent the number 2 overall pick on him. We got to see some fire come out of this guy. And Joe Douglas did everything he could to make this team better around him, adding to the defense, adding to the offense. And I don't see a lot of scenarios where we don't see Wilson improve from that QB 18. You got guys like Tua going around him. And look, here's the thing between him and Tua. And it's been a conversation this offseason. Tua seems limited, athletically to what he can do. We've seen, obviously the video of his deep ball falling short, from the other week is a big thing. So we all know Zach Wilson can throw this ball. He looked to have one of the better arms in the 2021 class. So I'm really excited to see what we can see from him this upcoming season.
Yeah, Zach Wilson's interesting for me. He's definitely, I'm not the biggest Zach Wilson fan. I think we've talked about it on other episodes here too. I don't think he's a bad, trade target given the things that you said as well, the points that you made. I think the stability, and like I just said, I just talked about Jameis Winston. So, guys range all over the place. But, yeah, Zach Wilson, I worry about the stability a little bit, but you touched on it. It's kind of a do or die season for him, and they did surround him with weapons. So, if anything, he's getting his best shot now. He's going around, guys like Tua, Mac Jones, Kirk Cousins, Kenny Pickett. I would rather have Zach Wilson than the, probably Kenny Pickett's of the world at this point. I have a tough time with him and Tua and Mac. I think they're in a similar situations. You look a little forward, Justin Fields is going about 4 quarterbacks ahead of Zach Wilson. Yeah, he's got the rushing upside. I'm a Justin Fields fan. I know you are too. But the difference between the Zach Wilson and Justin Fields right now is Justin Fields has no one to throw to. And Zach Wilson's got an abundance of weapons, And actually 2 things that I really liked that the Jets did at one position, but interestingly enough, they brought in CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin as 2 veteran tight ends to kind of help him out. It looks like Tyler Conklin is going to be the starter right now based on some of the things that I've seen just early on. He seems to be running with Zach Wilson in the ones, but it's May, so we'll see. I think Zach Wilson is an interesting trade target though. And as much as I'm not a big fan of him, he has flashed his upside, and it might not be as stable as I feel like maybe Mac Jones is. I think Mac Jones isn't going to lose his job anytime soon. I kind of think he's found a place there, but I don't think Mac Jones' upside is as high as Zach Wilson. And similar to what I just said about Justin Fields, Mac Jones also doesn't have the weapons. So Zach Wilson's interesting because you might find somebody, like me, who I might not roster Zach Wilson in the first place, but you might find somebody who has Zach Wilson who's listening to somebody like me or like other analysts out there that don't love Zach Wilson and might be looking to sell. And he's a guy that you might be able to get for significantly cheaper than where his upside actually is if this whole thing works out for him, with Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore and Breece Hall and all the weapons they put around him. So it's I think Zach Wilson is a little bit more of a, high risk, high reward guy. I think there's, a wide range of outcomes for him, but I don't mind him as a trade target here. Mm-hmm. My next guy, not super sexy again, but we got Jared Goff on the list, potential friend of the show, Jared Goff. So we'll see. But
that's a secret.
Shout out, Jared. Whenever you're ready.
That's a secret.
Whenever you're ready. Jared Goff being ranked as the QB 31 in ECR. He's 27, going on 28. Another guy where I kind of felt like this happened quickly. Felt like Jared was young, a couple minutes ago, and now he's almost 30. That being said,
we were all young once. We were all young once.
I guess that's true. We all did age at some point. He's a free agent in 2025. He was with the Rams, which is a drastically different situation than the Lions, clearly. But, he's had two good end-of-season finishes right around QB1. He finished at QB12 in 2017, QB13 in 2019. Again, with the Rams, different situation. But this Lions offense is starting to become a little bit, don't look now, but it's fun. They got Jamison Williams. They got DJ Chark. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have Hawkinson. You have Swift. It's become a fun offense in Detroit. And I don't know, how good they're actually going to be, but I also don't think they're going to be as bad as everybody thinks. DraftKings is projecting them 6.5 wins right now, which would put them at 8th overall in the draft if that happens. And something we talked about on our show, I believe it was with Thor maybe, but mixing it up, is so many times people look towards the future a little bit too soon and go, the Lions shouldn't draft a quarterback this year because they're going to be at the top of the draft next year. They'll get the top guy next year. Doesn't always work out that way. And if the Lions landed at 8 next year and you have maybe the Falcons and the Panthers and some of these other teams that really need quarterback that are ahead, they're not going to move back off Bryce Young and CJ Stroud next year. They're going to pick those quarterbacks. So the Lions might find themselves right outside that range to replace Goff with that elite guy. And I'm not saying Goff is the future in Detroit, but I'm also not sold that he's going anywhere as early as next year. I mean, if the Lions really step up and kind of show that they're a competitive team, Jared Goff has, shown that he can be a competitive quarterback, that he can lead a good team. So if he stays in Detroit, I think they're building a fun offense around him. He's a good guy to have. And if not, I could see Jared Goff turning his career into being a journeyman quarterback, similar to maybe I hate to throw Kirk Cousins in this mix because I think he's a little bit above journeyman. He's above average, but he's the type of guy that you're not excited about Kirk Cousins, but you're not really confused why he has a job. He's good. He performs pretty well. Jared Goff, I could see like that as well. And again, touching on what I touched about with Jameis and about these quarterbacks in general, super flex leagues, you look to get 2 quarterbacks, right? You got to start 2. What are you going to do with the third? Because you need to have a third quarterback for bye weeks in case somebody gets hurt. Jared Goff right now is so boring and so cheap that I think you can get him for much cheaper than you think. Send an offer to your Jared Goff manager in your league because he's probably the QB3 or QB4 on whatever team he's on. And maybe they need a wide receiver. Maybe they're looking for future picks because Jared Goff's their quarterback. Either way, I think Jared Goff's a decent trade target. Talking again about guys he's going around, similar to Jameis's range, around Daniel Jones, Desmond Ridder, Davis Mills, Baker Mayfield, all those guys right now. I mean, Jared Goff has a job. Baker Mayfield does not currently, and we don't know if he will or not. Davis Mills, I mean, I kind of like Davis Mills, so I don't want to trash him here with, bumping up Goff, but is Goff much different than Davis Mills? Probably not. I mean, Davis Mills could lose his job really any day if it doesn't work out great. I see you frowning there, so you might not agree. I like Davis Mills. I'm just saying. And you got Daniel Jones.
I like Davis Mills a lot. Too.
I like Davis Mills too. But you got Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is on the hottest of hot seats, if you ask me. I almost thought the Giants might address. I almost thought the Giants might address quarterback this year in the draft. So they didn't. But yeah, I mean, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, exciting. Obviously, untapped upside that we don't really know yet, but they're still trying to earn a job. Jared Goff is secured in Detroit for at least this season if he stays healthy. And we'll see what happens after that. So there's my Jared Goff piece.
I think for me, and the main problem I have with Jared Goff is that if Detroit drafts a quarterback, if they feel the need to draft a quarterback next year, what happens to Jared Goff? Because I truly don't know if he is a starter on another team in this league. And sure, you have your teams like the Giants and teams like that might be desperate enough with their situations right now. Maybe Washington if Carson Wentz and Sam Howell don't work out. Potentially Tennessee down the line. I don't know if there's a situation where Jared Goff would go in and start. So go ahead.
Let me counter that with a year ago, would you have said that Marcus Mariota and Mitchell Trubisky could have potentially been starters coming into this season?
They're very clearly not long-term options. They are
agreed. I don't think
bridge options.
Yeah, let's get into a little debate here because I also don't think Jared will be. I don't think Jared's going to be a long-term option unless he completely, elevates himself this season, unless he takes a massive step. I mean, so far what we've seen of Jared Goff, nobody should invest again in like a long-term deal or anything like that. But we're talking about QB 31, potentially there's 32 teams in the league. So maybe the worst starter in the league is the range that we're in. And I don't think Jared is that bad is what I'm saying. So I think you at least get 1 year out of him. And then if you get any extra, that's a bonus. But I don't think you'll have to pay the long-term quarterback starter money in Dynasty for Jared Goff. I guess that is my point.
I want to throw something funny in here. It wasn't that long ago that we were lauding Carson Wentz and Jared Goff as guys who would be entrenched fantasy and franchise starters for like the rest of their careers. And now it's like 2 or 3 years later, and both of them are viewed as journeyman backups at the best. At this point in this career, who would have thought? I never thought that. I never thought they were good. I didn't call Carson Wentz a top 3 quarterback.
I wouldn't have thought that. I threw away my Carson Wentz jersey, so hands.
I wasn't that disrespectful to my quarterback who helped us win a Super Bowl. But
no disrespect to Carson. I'm the first to defend Carson anytime. I love me some Carson Wentz.
I know, but talk about a guy who needs to elevate his game this year. And that leads me into my third guy, and that is Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Because is there a quarterback whose dynasty ranking is in as much flux as Jalen Hurts is this year? Daily. I mean, depending on what he does, like he could be as high as the QB 4 or 5, or he could be down in the 20s next year based on what he does this season. So
if Jalen Hurts got a contract extension, he'd be a top 5 dynasty quarterback
easily. So that leads me into my reasoning why you should be trading for Jalen Hurts in Dynasty. So the point for me is that, look, the Eagles, much like the Jets, did everything they could to upgrade to a point where they felt comfortable handing Jalen Hurts the reins for 2022 and beyond. They handed him all the tools. The only thing now that is left is for Jalen to do the work himself and have a stellar season, which would make the Eagles want to invest in him. After this season, he is eligible for a contract extension. If he performs, it'll be a big one. This will mean the Eagles are tying, 25, 30% of their cap into A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. That's a big thing for this team. That's a big thing for this team. These are two guys that are best friends. It makes sense that they would want to stay together. Makes sense that the Eagles know they would want to stay together. So for me, I'm betting on the fact that Jalen Hurts has a massive year in a so-called contract year for him, as he works to prove that he is not going to be one of the QBs that was once talked about as a star. and fell into obscurity. So here's the thing. They didn't add a running back in this draft. We all thought they would. They added Kennedy Brooks as a UDFA option, but here's the thing. They didn't add a significant running back like a lot of us thought they would. They kept their running back core that they had. Jalen Hurts added almost 50% of his fantasy points last year through the rushing game. He had 10 touchdowns and almost 800 yards. This is a guy who can completely change your fantasy lineup on a week-to-week basis. But the problem for Dynasty is he's not viewed as a Dynasty option because of the uncertainty around him. So for me, a big part of Jalen Hurts this year is proving that he can upgrade through the passing game. And the addition of A.J. Brown, like we said, one of his best friends, should lead to jumps in efficiency and overall pass numbers as well. You know, A.J. Brown is a yak god. This is a guy who could drastically up Jalen Hurts' touchdowns. He only had 16 passing touchdowns that year or last year. He could jump that up to 25 this year with the addition of A.J. Brown. Add A.J. Brown to Devon Smith and Dallas Goedert and Quez Watkins. You have a very good offense here. And the fact that this is still the number one ranked rushing attack in the NFL means that you can use that threat and run that play action all day long. So I am so high on Jalen Hurts this year. I want to see him succeed so badly, and I really think all the pieces are in place. It's just got to be in the mindset, and I think his mindset is there. He's set. He's ready to go. He's going to turn in a top 3 fantasy season, and he's going to get the Eagles into the playoffs again.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and be unbiased with my opinion, but it's going to be tough because I love Jalen Hurts, and you love Jalen Hurts, and we all love Jalen Hurts, as he should be loved. And, he's an interesting trade target because, he's somebody where if you were to, start offering trades for Jalen Hurts, 2-3 months ago, maybe when the Eagles are bringing in Matt Corral for a visit or, bringing in an ex-quarterback for a visit or, any of those things. Jalen Hurts is somebody that will always be evaluated and reevaluated, which it almost seems like every single day. Is Jalen Hurts the franchise quarterback? Is Jalen Hurts, replaceable? Blah, blah, blah. You could say all the things you want about Jalen Hurts. It's been talked about. Everybody can't keep Jalen Hurts out of their mouth. And it's interesting, especially for Dynasty, because he does lack the stability right now. And the Eagles, flirting with every quarterback in existence, doesn't always help that. That being said, I think the A.J. Brown investment and how quickly they were able to do that and how confident they were in doing that, I think does speak to Jalen. And, it's not that A.J. Brown is, the Eagles didn't know A.J. Brown's a top-level guy. Clearly A.J. Brown's done enough on his own to warrant getting a contract extension, to warrant, being traded for what he's traded for, all those things. But he is really good friends with Jalen Hurts, and that's been, publicized all over. And it's not necessarily, wise to bring in your quarterback's, great friend, sign him to a contract extension, and then you move on from Jalen Hurts right after that. So we'll see what happens. Again, Jalen Hurts, something that people forget, Jalen Hurts has gotten better every single year. Whether that has been reaching, the ceiling or these top quarterbacks as a passer, no. But he's improved every single year. Now he's going to get another offseason. This is probably the least noisy offseason for Jalen Hurts, where for the first time in the NFL, he gets an offseason where he at least knows he's the guy. He knows what he's got around him, which is, better than he's had. And, it can only really go – I don't want to say it can only go up because it can go down if they move on from Jalen Hurts. But let's speak Dynasty, okay? So let me go unbiased here from Eagles takes. Is different than Jared Goff, who you just talked about, and you said, you're skeptical. If he didn't work out in Detroit, then he'll get another opportunity. I'm not skeptical about that with Jalen Hurts. If the Eagles choose unwisely to move on from Jalen Hurts, he will be playing somewhere else for sure. And I'm confident. I'm confident saying that. Jalen Hurts is the full package in terms of the person and the image that comes to your team as well as what he does on the field. And the NFL knows that. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a stand-up dude. He will get a job somewhere else, and he is good enough with his legs. He's better than he gets credit for with his arms. Jalen Reagor couldn't get off the line of scrimmage, man. I mean, it's tough to play quarterback when you have a wide receiver that really can't do anything for you. So the upgrade of A.J. Brown to have Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Dallas Goedert, the running backs, who I'm going to touch on a little bit. I think it's really valuable for Jalen. I think he is a good trade target because it's going as QB 12. I do feel confident that if Jalen Hurts got a contract extension tomorrow for, 4 years, X $1 million, whatever it is, Jalen Hurts catapults into that top 5 discussion of dynasty quarterbacks because we know what he can do at least fantasy points wise. If you're skeptical of him as a passer, he can score fantasy points. So I think it's an interesting discussion. The guys that are going in front of Jalen, the mainstays, the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, Herbert, Lamar, Burrow, Kyler. But some of the other guys, Trevor Lawrence. What does Trevor Lawrence have over Justin Herbert? He has stability. He has that his franchise invested in him as the first overall pick. What he's shown us on the field, that's not comparable to what Jalen.
It's not stability, yeah.
So Trevor Lawrence will have to take a step. I think he will. So I'm not, going to trash Trevor Lawrence on here. I think he's going to be just fine. But all that he has over Jalen Hurts right now is the stability at the position, the investment that his team made. So, I'm excited, about Jalen Hurts going forward. I tried to keep it unbiased. I know I didn't. I know I talked like I'm an Eagles fan who loves Jalen. That being said, I think that, he's got so much to go. So much can go up from here. So trade for Jalen Hurts now before he's, in that top 5 range.
I mean, I can see that Derek's ears were burning as well as he sensed that we were talking about Jalen Hurts as well. Look, none of us can stay unbiased about Jalen Hurts. The fact remains that if you are a contending dynasty team right now this season and you have an opportunity to go out and get Jalen Hurts, no matter what you think happens next year, I implore you to go out and get him because Jalen Hurts is probably going to be drafted as the redraft QB 7, 8, or 9, possibly even lower if your teammates don't believe in him. He's going to finish as a top 5 quarterback. He could finish as the QB overall this season. There are realistic outcomes. You never know with these rushing quarterbacks. We saw it with Lamar Jackson when he won the MVP. This is a kind of guy who can do the exact same thing. He's got the same crazy athletic ability with his legs to go out there and get it done on the ground. Look, there is nothing that's going to keep me from taking Jalen Hurts in my redraft leagues. And if I'm a contender in Dynasty, trust me, I'm already out there looking to trade for him.
And let's move to the last quarterback here, who's, another Russian quarterback, funny enough. So my last guy here is Tyler Huntley. We saw the flashes this year. We hadn't really gotten to see him before. The quarterback from Utah backing up Lamar Jackson came in and, lit a little bit of a fire this year. ECR on Fantasy Pros right now is QB 44, which is fair. He's a backup. He's backing up Lamar Jackson right now, but he played, in 5 games this year when Lamar was out. He had over 40 rushing yards in every game, plus 70 rushing yards twice, which, us fantasy people love, and 2 rushing touchdowns. But just let that soak in. I mean, that's over 40 rushing yards every game he played, which is, again, good for us fantasy people, good for a safe fantasy floor. That's 16 points per game in the 5 games. He will be a restricted free agent again next year. We'll see what Baltimore does. But, I love Lamar Jackson. I'm not really worried about Lamar Jackson's stability, but, the way he plays, you never know. You never know if he's going to go out for a little bit. Tyler Huntley not only came in and, played well, he showed good chemistry with the guys out there. Mark Andrews had a huge boost when Tyler Huntley was playing. So he's, another trade target for me that's a little bit further back. And I'm trying to speed through it a little bit because we got some running backs to go over too. But some of the guys around Huntley, ranked around him at least, are Taysom Hill, Gardner Minshew, Kyle Trask, Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell, Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, all those guys are an injury away from playing, every single one of them. And I think Huntley's got the most upside, actually, of any of those guys that I just named when he actually gets on the field. His average per game in those 5 games was boosted. I'm not going to, I'll be transparent here, by a 35-point game against Green Bay in Week 15. So that was a big boom game for him. But even the fact that he can have that sort of game, we haven't even seen Kyle Trask play, Gardner Minshew, Taysom Hill. All these guys are questionable. I think you can get Huntley for pretty cheap amount. And, the upside could be huge if Lamar misses any time, or, if you wait a year, stash him, and he finds a job somewhere else. I think that he's an interesting trade target. And like we talked about a little bit, I went a little deeper with some of these quarterbacks to find some I guess gems, or almost like QB3, QB4 types. So Huntley fits that, where he's a backup now, but he's a injury away from competing, I think, to be in that QB1 range based on what he can do with his legs.
Yeah, absolutely. I view him as almost like a mini Lamar Jackson for the way that we saw him play out there. So I really enjoyed that. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's hop over into the second part of this show, into our running backs. And we each prepared a few running backs as well. So I'll go ahead and start it off with my favorite trade target for a running back right now. That's my man, A.J. Dillon. So, look, we all know what's happening in Green Bay right now. Aaron Jones is obviously back. But the thing with Aaron Jones is the Packers have an out for him after this season. He doesn't have a huge dead cap hit. And they have to pay him an $8.1 million base salary on the first day of the next league year. So we could be seeing A.J. Dillon be the RB1 for this team in 2023. You obviously know that as long as Aaron Jones is in Green Bay, he's the guy. I've said it on many podcasts, so far this spring. I could see Aaron Jones getting 1,000 this year. Like he's probably the best wide receiver on the Packers. That's not a huge stretch to say that. But this team showed that of A.J. Dillon as a rusher last year. They put him as the primary guy in the running game. He was the goal line back for a good amount of it in the second half of the season. And the best part about it is he had over 1,000 scrimmage yards. Like this kid can ball. He had 1,116 scrimmage yards last year. He caught 92% of his targets, and he had multiple games with 2+ receptions. He had 4 games with 4 or more receptions. So the thing with him is he may not be a guy that wins you your league this year, but he is 100% going to be a guy that you want on your team in 2023 and beyond. He's only 24. He's under his rookie contract for another couple seasons. He's a guy that is a solid floor option and can give you ceiling options starting next season. So I'm really high on what A.J. Dillon can show you there. Again, like I said, Aaron Jones presents a obstacle this season, but we've seen Aaron Jones also have some soft tissue issues in the past. Those massive quads, I would say A.J. Dillon's capable of getting injured at this point. So the guy has a possible 15 touch per game workload this season. That thing skyrocket 25 touches a game in 2023 if everything breaks his way.
Yeah, fun fact about A.J. Dillon actually is, he has me blocked on Instagram.
Why is that? Hold on. Why is that?
I had a page, a couple of years ago. We used to do, shout out Austin, my buddy, if he's watching. We used to do some, college football content, some fantasy content together, and we didn't have A.J. Dillon in our top 10 running backs coming into the draft. So he blocked us, which, couldn't even apologize. Let him make his case why he should be in my top 10. He blocked me before we had the chance. That being said,
if you're listening, unblock Jay.
Yeah, AJ, we know you're listening, man. So just unblock me.
I see that one person.
That being said, you talked about Aaron Jones. Clearly that is the roadblock for A.J. Dillon. But he, was pretty productive last year, even with Aaron Jones there. And in Dynasty, if you're not thinking a year ahead, if you're not thinking in the future, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing playing Dynasty? You've got to be trying to get guys like this that, yeah, it might not happen now, but it could really pop next year, and you're able to get them a little bit cheaper now. So where's he going? You said RB23. So, yeah, it's around, Elijah Mitchell, Fournette, James Conner, Miles Sanders, CEH. Those are the type of guys he's going around. And I think that, what Green Bay did this offseason, not really adding the wide receivers to replace Devontae Adams. They add Christian Watson, they add Sammy Watkins. I think Aaron Jones is in for a huge year too. I think in the passing game especially. I think he's just gonna have a big season. I think he's a top 5 guy going into this year. But AJ Dillon's a guy of the future, it seems like. And I hate to make the comparison because it's lazy with him and Derrick Henry, because yes, they're both big, and that's kind of where it ends. But you had to wait a little bit for Derrick Henry. You waited a couple years, and then he hit. And I mean, he's just been a force since then, the past 4 or 5 years or so. So we waited a little bit for AJ Dillon, and really not that long. I mean, he was productive this last year. He was definitely usable in fantasy. So I like AJ Dillon as a trade target. Probably not as much as some. I've seen him get traded for definitely more than I would. But for the right price, I think AJ Dillon's a good trade target. A good guy to go after, especially for somebody who might be thinking more of a win now. You find a team like that who might have AJ Dillon, and you give him something that can help him now, because AJ Dillon might be more of a help in the future. So I like that call. My next one is also similar to that. Somebody who might not help you as much this year, but can next year. It's Khalil Herbert, and I'm hoping he can next year, because I wasn't expecting him to help me out in fantasy this past year, and he did. David Montgomery got hurt, and Khalil Herbert was used completely differently than I think we would have initially expected. He's going, I hate to say going, because I think we're doing ADP, but we're doing Fantasy Pros ECR. He is being ranked right now as the RB 45. So pretty deep, doesn't sound too great. I got the RB 45 on my team, but he just turned 24 years old. He'll be a free agent in 2025. And the caveat with that is David Montgomery will be a free agent next offseason. I don't think David Montgomery is going to get a contract extension close to what he's going to want, I guess is the right way to say it. I don't think David Montgomery is going to be paid long-term by the Bears, especially with the way the Bears have built this roster. I think they've made it kind of clear they're looking towards the future and putting, some players around Justin Fields, maybe a little bit in the future, even further than this year, because they didn't really have much talent around him. I can't see them investing in a running back to a big number to what David Montgomery is going to want, which leaves Khalil Herbert, unless they replace him as well. But this year, when David Montgomery was out, he had a 4-game stretch where Khalil Herbert kind of got the whole workload. He got 18 carries, 19 carries, 18 carries, and 23 carries, which is kind of a rarity in today's NFL, to have a guy who actually gets, my lighting's getting all messed up. To have a guy who actually gets, the 15 plus, 20 plus carries is significant, because then you're pretty much, you're expecting him to have a pretty good per carry statistic, and then you're just hoping for him to roll into the end zone. And if you're getting enough carries, you're hoping that happens. So he averaged 13 points per game in that 4-game stretch. And if they move on from David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert could find himself in a fruitful situation, at least volume-wise. So I like him. Like I said, just turned 24, so he's kind of in that sweet range where we might have a 2-3 year window of him hitting. So I am more hopeful that what Chicago did when they actually were able to use him in a full workload when David Montgomery was out. They did, and that doesn't happen all the time with the backup, or I'm blanking out. Khalil Herbert went in like the 5th or 6th round. So I mean, for the Bears to use him to that extent was inspiring to me. What did Robbie have here? Hope they use Herbert to. Yes, I agree. I hope Herbert gets used to the way he deserves.
Yeah, I'm a Herbert fan. Look, he looked like he was ready to be that kind of guy who could handle like a volume workload out of the backfield. He doesn't offer a ton in the passing game, but he has suitable hands, and he looked like he really was getting up there in his carries. It probably played a decent part in their comfortability in releasing Tariq Cohen. Obviously, prayer to Tariq Cohen, who suffered another torn Achilles today. It's all awful news. But look, Khalil Herbert has the spot, and there have been rumors that Chicago is not, really considering extending Montgomery at this point. I wouldn't blame them. He's been okay as a lead back for them, but there's definitely been something left to be desired on the field from Montgomery since he was drafted in the 3rd round a couple seasons ago, and I believe it was 2019. So, with that coming up, the Bears could let Khalil Herbert maybe take this early down role and draft a pass catching specialist in next year's draft to go along with him. We've said all along that the Bears are building for 2023 and beyond. It would be shocking to see them draft a running back before they're ready to compete, but that could be next year or the year after, depending on how they do this year. They want to surround Justin Fields with weapons to succeed, and giving him a potential check down option is definitely a big part of that. So hopefully.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. And I think they could add somebody else. And let me say just a caveat to kind of these two running backs that I'm going to talk about, Khalil Herbert included, is, these aren't guys that, you're going out and buying and expecting to slot into your lineup right away. They're guys that you're going to have to invest in and hope for the best, hope some things to roll right. But Khalil Herbert, and then my next guy who I'll talk about, but the idea with them, especially in dynasty trades, is, and I've done a few this offseason with both the guys, I'm going to say, and Khalil Herbert, one of them. If you make a bigger trade and you're making a trade with a guy who has Khalil Herbert, and maybe you guys are negotiating back and forth, and you had Khalil Herbert all at a third round pick, or you had Khalil Herbert all at a second, you had, those guys, Khalil Herberts, are guys you can get as add-ins in a lot of trades, and the other person who you're trading with, that other manager, might not see it that way, might think, okay, fine, I'll add Khalil Herbert to get this thing done. And you on the other side are like, great, now I've got some more depth at running back, and I have a guy who, might be an RB injury away from, being a startable asset for me. So that's kind of the idea. Who's your next guy?
Yeah. My next guy is going to be Isaiah Spiller. And while I came under, I took a little bit of heat in my immediate thoughts when the Chargers drafted Isaiah Spiller. And I wasn't really sure what to think at first. I was luckily turned around by people I trust, including you and a couple others, on what Isaiah Spiller actually means for Austin Eckler's workload. And the truth of the matter is, he's there to complement Austin Eckler, and he's a really, really good complement for Eckler. So, with Spiller, this is a guy who's only 20 years old. He's 3.5 years younger than Najee Harris. Like that's huge for a running back.
I love the Najee Harris age stats. They're the best.
They truly are. They're almost as good as the Velus Jones age stats. Velus Jones is applying for his AARP card in a couple of years. But back to Isaiah Spiller. He's the perfect guy to complement Austin Eckler. Eckler has been saying for a long time, and as a vocal fantasy football guy himself, that we heard it right from his mouth. So, with Spiller, this is a guy who comes in and is extremely pro-ready. He was regarded as one of the most pro-ready running backs in this year's draft. And it wasn't a very strong class outside of Breece Hall. But Spiller comes in as a guy who won't wow you athletically that much.
I caught that.
Spiller comes in as a guy that won't wow you athletically that much, but he's the guy that's going to be able to perform as almost like a power back in the immediate. So he might spell Eckler at the goal line. He's going to take some targets away. He'll help him on as a change of pace guy on third down. So we could see Spiller get 125, 130 touches this year. And here's the thing: in the future, Eckler has almost no guaranteed money Eckler has almost no guaranteed money for 2023. The Chargers could be looking to move on after this season. I know it seems hard to believe, but this is the way football works. When teams draft a guy next in line and the guy's money runs out, they tend to look for trades or ways to move on from that player while still recouping some value. So, he was viewed as a pro-ready back. He's not very athletic, which is going to definitely take a little bit away from him, but he'll be ready to spell Eckler as he goes. He's decent in pass protection, and we could definitely see Spiller down the line as the starting running back for the Chargers as soon as 2023 in the best case scenario, but more likely something like 2024.
Yes, but I mean, I'm with you on this, and I'll get to that. But Spiller was already trying to get a little extra touches today on Twitter. I saw, PFF tweeted something, their typical ones of like, is Justin Herbert a top 3 quarterback? And Isaiah Spiller quote tweeted it and said like, yes, he is, or something like that. And, immediately he's trying to get extra
QB1.
Touches. Yeah, exactly. He's the best. He's the best ever. I want the ball. I'm with you on Isaiah Spiller. You know, you called me. We were talking right after that on day 3 of the draft of kind of how it's going to impact Eckler, what his impact is going to be, and you know, it's a common narrative to talk about. So I mean, I'm not breaking any rocket science here talking about it, but you know, the Chargers have been trying to find that piece, what we're hoping Isaiah Spiller can be, the complement to Austin Eckler. You know, it's Justin Jackson, is Josh Kelly, it was Larry Roundtree, and you know, I think the difference with that a little bit is we were already a little excited about Isaiah Spiller before the landing spot, whereas I feel like Josh Kelly, Larry Roundtree, it was more the landing spot that actually made them the exciting prospects rather than where Spiller, it was like we're all waiting on the edge of our seats to be like, who's going to take Isaiah Spiller? Why is Isaiah Spiller still on the board? You know, Daniel Jeremiah's list as the days went on in the draft was Spiller still at the top of the list, you know, like who's going to take him? And so it was almost that it was a combination of a great value pick by the Chargers and a great landing spot for Isaiah Spiller, where he lands somewhere that's actually looking for that compliment. So I also, like you mentioned, I mean, I think, I don't want to say this wrong because he's at least one of them. He's one of, if not the youngest running back that came out this year. And so, and he was also dealing with a groin injury throughout all the, you know, workout stuff this offseason throughout the spring.
He didn't test well.
He didn't test originally, and then he didn't test well, like you said. And so it was a combination of both, but apparently he was dealing with an injury. So maybe give him the benefit of the doubt. And at some point, man, we all say all year we don't care. The combine's not going to do anything. All the testing, you know, it's overrated. And then they test, and everybody loses their fucking minds. So it always goes that way every year. But I'm excited about Isaiah Spiller. You know, I picked him in the early half of the second round of rookie drafts because when it gets to those running backs, I think he is one of the more appealing options there, where he's got, you know, standalone value. And I think really different than Rachaad White is, you know, someone who you're going to actually talk about in a little bit, but similar to him, where they're an injury away from maybe being, you know, an RB1 or somebody that, you know, similar to, you know, I would say Isaiah Spiller, a more talented and, you know, a little bit more touted player than Khalil Herbert, but kind of a similar role to and a better offense, where if Austin Eckler went down, I could see Isaiah Spiller getting, you know, 15 plus carries a game, which is, you know, a very nice place to be in the Chargers offense. So a lot better than it is in the Bears offense. So I like the Isaiah Spiller call there. And, you know, it might be tough to sometimes trade for rookies, but, you know, feed him a little information. Be like, oh, you know, he ran a 4.6 and, you know, Austin Eckler's there. I don't know. You know, feed him a little bit. But I like the Isaiah Spiller call.
Let's dive into your last guy here before we dive
into my
into
next one. We'll try and, you know, not gush too much, try and not become biased again. But it's Kenneth Gainwell, which I think is, you know, another interesting one where I'll touch on first that I think the downside was they brought back Boston Scott, which, you know, the Eagles brought back Boston Scott. A lot of people were kind of thought Boston Scott was going to move on. You know, he's a professional gamer too. I mean, so the guy's got a couple streams of income these days. But it's true, man. It's true. They brought back Kenneth Gainwell, or they brought back Boston Scott, which, you know, might, you know, hurt the upside of Kenneth Gainwell, might hurt his role in the Eagles offense potentially. But what we saw at the end of last season was a total, you know, committee of running backs. You know, it was Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard mixing in. You know, Kenneth Gainwell, another one, you know, similar to what you said about Zach Wilson, came into camp this year, apparently put on some weight, looks a little thick, looks like he got a little bit bigger. And I think the Eagles used Kenneth Walker a little bit more than people originally thought they would, based on where he was drafted and based on kind of the other guys in the room. You just scowled at that, so you might have some different thoughts. But, you know, he's still being ranked as RB 46, which I think is fair. But again, you know, he's a running back, injury away, a couple injuries away, who knows, from really stepping into a sweet role there. Did I say Kenneth Walker? I got Kenneth Walker on my mind after you dissed him and said that there was only one good running back in this class.
You caught that, huh?
I did catch that. But, you know, Kenneth Gainwell is going into his second year. He just turned 23, and Miles Sanders is a free agent after this year. So we'll see kind of the direction the Eagles go. But, you know, the comp when the Eagles drafted Kenny Gainwell with Nick Sirianni coming out from Indianapolis was, oh, maybe Kenny Gainwell can be more of the you know, Naeem Hines can be that, but I think he can get a little bit more. And the Eagles used him a little bit more than that. You know, he had 12 carries twice, 13 once. He had some boom weeks where he had 20 points, 19 points, 13 points, which is, you know, good for an RB in the 40 to 50 range. Uh, and here we go. Robbie in the comments saying Nick Sirianni hates Gainwell. I don't think so. I hope not. He had 4 games with 5+ targets, 2 with 8+ targets. I mean, getting 8 targets, as a rookie in Kenneth Gainwell's role is, pretty nice to see. Finished with 33 receptions his rookie season, which again, pretty good for a guy in his role. He really wasn't, put into a starting role. He wasn't on the field as much as we would have liked to see. So, and Miles Sanders has become a liability in the passing game, which I think we've all noticed over the past couple of years. I mean, whenever they need to depend on Miles Sanders to make a play in the passing game, he is not as of late. So I think the Kenneth Gainwell role can get a little bit bigger. And I mean, injury away, but he's also got his own standalone value. So he's another guy where, you add him into a trade for, a pick in the future or something like that. And, I think you can get him as a piece instead of being the focal point of any trade. Don't go out there, selling your soul for Kenneth Gainwell, but you can get him as a piece. I think that, you come out as a winner more times than not, considering he's just an add-on.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I think about Kenneth Gainwell is I'm wondering what the Eagles do with the running back position. Miles Sanders is set to be a free agent very soon. There's been whispers that they don't plan to extend him. We could see him moved at the trade deadline. That could be very interesting for Kenneth Gainwell, but it also could open up a window into how the Eagles see this running back room. Look, we all know that the Eagles know that they were the number 1 rushing attack last year in the NFL. But what we don't know is how they plan to keep that kind of going. And the fact that they minimized Miles Sanders' role through the last couple of seasons could definitely mean that they plan to move on from him. We could see what happens in next year's draft. I definitely think the Eagles do draft a running back next year. So I'm very interested to see what they do with Kenneth Gainwell. I really like Gainwell as the type of guy who can split out into the slot as well, kind of run some of those wheel routes as well out of the backfield. Like, he's a guy who was a very good receiver when he was at Memphis. So I'm definitely intrigued to see what he can do this year. I really hope that he gets into that kind of Nyheim Hines scat back role. So yeah. I'm really interested to see that.
I mean, the dude's 5'9", 200 pounds soaking wet.
Right.
So, I mean, he's not going to get any sort of workhorse role. I think you're probably right. The Eagles will continue to add guys around him. But I view it more as and I don't want to say James White, because James White's kind of like the ceiling of what you hope a Kenneth Gainwell could be. But a similar role like that, where there's always going to be other guys, but he might be a spot start guy that you can play and hope, okay, maybe he'll get, 5-6 targets today, and that right. Will do it for fantasy. So
I can only think that Robbie is trying to talk about Brian Robinson here. I do not want to talk about anybody that hurts my boy Gibson. So we can talk about him in an episode never. So because that's painful to me, and I do not like pain. Clearly you do. So, but I am going to move on to our last guy here, and that is, of course, Rachaad White. So, he landed in a great spot in Tampa. Now, I know Leonard Fournette just got signed to a 3-year, $21 million deal. What I also know is that this is Leonard Fournette we're talking about. He's a guy who is, a pretty good thumper on the ground. He's 230 pounds. He's a big guy. But while he gives you the ability, he's got sure hands and he might catch 60 to 70 balls. He doesn't wow you in the passing game. Like, he's not doing a ton after contact. Like, he's not one of those guys that's going to break loose down the sideline and take it 70 yards for a touchdown. He's the guy who's going to pick up and move the chains as you need for him. So, he'll look solid for a time, but I think I think the Buccaneers drafted Rachaad White because they want a very capable pass catcher out of the backfield. And that's exactly what Rachaad White was. This is a guy who was hyper productive at Arizona State. He had 3 seasons of over 1,000 yards from scrimmage every single year. So, and a lot of those came in the passing game. So he's a guy that gives you a lot through the air. He's got a chip on his shoulder. We saw someone in the fantasy community get a tweet taken out of context by Rachaad White. Rachaad White DM'd him saying, don't compare me to Ronald Jones. And I'm on my game. I want to ball. I love to ball. I'm going to be the starting running back. He wants to start. He has said that he wants to be the RB1. He's hyped to play with Brady. I would be hyped to play with Brady. I can't blame him. So, he wants to be the RB1 in this offense. And I see a very feasible, path to him being the RB1 as soon as 2023. So, he's got an extremely good 3-down skill set, and he's he'll be a passing down specialist in year 1. But since Fournette is 27, his, White's role can only grow. And as long as Brady is there, sky's the limit for me. So I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I think it's a good target as well. Similar to, the Isaiah Spiller conversation we were having, it's injury away from, being a potential RB1, down the stretch when it matters. And those are the kind of situations you have to pay attention to, that don't look sexy on the surface. Like, yeah, he's behind Leonard Fournette. Yeah, Giovanni Bernard's there. I mean, Keyshawn Vaughn, I guess, if we mention him. But, those are the kind of situations that are a low key that you try and buy into. It might be tough, depending on where somebody invested with White in their rookie drafts. But, you can come in and, again, swing in with maybe a win now team, somebody who's looking for some sort of other assets. And, Rachaad White could really become valuable at the end of the season if Leonard Fournette gets hurt, even if Fournette's there. I mean, if Fournette's playing and Rachaad White's really, involved as a passing down back, the way that you said, it's a totally different element. And I mean, Brady's made plenty of backs valuable in that facet in terms of being a passing down guy and just kind of, targeting his running backs enough. They're going to be scoring a ton of points, as long as Brady's out there. So there could be some touchdowns to go around. I am in on that one as well. I think that's a good pick.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, we went through a ton of guys today. Like, this was hugely informative. We hope you guys got all your trade targets out of if we missed anything, let us know. You can always find this show on YouTube every week, typically on Tuesdays at 9:30 Eastern time. But, as always, help us out. Drop a subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Swagman95. And Jay, where can they find you?
You can find me at JR, man. It's just the name. Just put the at in front of it and you can find me there.
But thank you guys for tuning into this episode of High Floor Football. Next week, we will be back finishing up this series by breaking down our favorite wide receiver and tight end Dynasty trade targets. But again, thank you guys, and we will see you on